Okay. Thank you, everyone who's joined us this far. I'm sure some more folks will be joining on. But my name is Helen Wiley. I'm SBP's Disaster Preparedness Program Director, and today we're excited to bring you a webinar on getting your roof prepared for high wind events. I am joined by my colleague Dulcie Togstead, who will be doing the bulk of today's presentation and sharing her expertise in roof construction from SBP's own rebuilding work. But this is a really important topic, and we're excited to have you all on with us. A few housekeeping notes. Please put any questions you have in the Q&A box, and at the end of the presentation, we'll be doing a moderated Q&A session. If you have any other comments or want to introduce yourself, please feel free to use the chat function. And if you have any additional questions you'd like to ask our team, we'll be sharing our team email address, and you can always follow up with us over email following today's session. So with that, those of you that aren't familiar with us, SBP is a national disaster recovery and resilience nonprofit that was originally founded after Hurricane Katrina almost 2 decades ago down in St. Bernard Parish, Louisiana. And our work spans the whole disaster cycle. We rebuild homes after major disaster events. We share our partnership model and building practices with other organizations. We do preparedness work with partners to better equip them to serve their communities. And we have important government advisory and advocacy services to advocate for the policy changes needed to better serve high-risk communities around the U.S. In the Prepare program specifically, we work to empower not only households, but the community leaders with essential tools to more proactively prepare and build resilience to minimize loss and suffering when disasters occur. And you can learn more about our program and different service offerings on the SBP website. Really quickly in that regard, SBP has a fantastic resource hub available on our website where you can find not only our preparedness guides and resources, but other upcoming training events that we're offering both households and community leaders, whether they're nonprofits or government officials. That resource hub also houses all of our recovery guides and resources on important topics like how to muck and gut your home and mold remediation, among other areas. We also recently launched a monthly preparedness newsletter for our audience sets that shares household level tips and resources for practitioners that work with households on preparedness topics. And so please feel free to subscribe to our newsletter. We'd love to have you join us for monthly content. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Dulcie to lead us through today's quick tips session on roof preparedness. And with that, I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Helen, and thanks to all of you in attendance for spending a little bit of time with us today. Like Helen said, I'm going to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes covering these 5 agenda items you see on the screen here. And my hope is that by the end of our time together, you have a handful of options to consider in regards to actions that you can take to have a more secure roof. So let's get started. Next slide. All right, I want to begin by giving a little bit of context to the prevalence of high wind events across the country. So that's what this map on the screen is showing us here. So in the year 2023, the United States experienced 28 separate weather or climate disasters, and about half of them had high wind impacts. And when we talk about high wind, generally, we mean winds that are exceeding 50 miles per hour, because that is typically when we begin to see wind causing minor damage. And so obviously, as wind speeds increase, so does the risk of damage. Most of us probably think of hurricanes and tornadoes when we talk about severe weather, high wind events. But it's important to keep in mind that thunderstorms can also produce high winds. And so just because you may not live along the coast or in a tornado alley, that does not mean that your home isn't potentially at risk for high wind events. 75 to 85% of catastrophic wind-related damage to homes begins with the roof and the roof failing. So let's dive into the content you came here for, which is those 5 tips to be prepared, to get your roof prepared for high wind events. I'm going to start by sharing some low cost, like low lift tips, and we're going to work our way up as we go through the presentation to tips that are going to be a little bit more involved and more costly considerations. So the first tip we're going to start with here is I'm going to arm you with what it takes to inspect your roof. Inspecting your roof should be something you take action on regularly, say once a year. By regularly inspecting your roof, you are more than likely to catch issues before they actually become larger issues and in turn more costly concerns. So when inspecting your roof, here are some signs of potential issue to look for. So the condition of the roof covering. Do you have loose shingles? Do you have missing tiles? Do you have rust or discoloration? Taking a look at your vents and skylights and chimneys. Are those areas of penetration sealed appropriately? Do you have any other loose flashing or seams along the edges of your roofing? Looking for indentations or marks on the roof surface where water could seep through, as well as considering your gutters and downspouts in this inspection. So depending on the elevated height of your home and your individual ability level, this inspection is actually something that you could consider doing on your own, as well as having a professional look at it as well to assess the condition of it. The cost for that roughly somewhere between $0 and $600 depending. And SBP has a roof inspection checklist available on our website. I think you should see the link in your chat. That can be used as a resource to help guide you through doing a roof inspection. Next slide. If you consider going the route of hiring a professional, want to remind folks to make sure you do some due diligence here. Word of mouth is always a good approach to take when hiring a professional, but you still want to make sure that you are diligent in vetting and working with contractors. So what that means is all in the spirit of trying to avoid contractor fraud. So you want to ensure professionals you're hiring have the appropriate license and insurance and or are valid to be able to work in whatever state or county you live in. Take the time to get multiple bids from various professionals to ensure that the pricing seems reasonable. And then reading those contracts thoroughly to make sure that you understand it before you sign or offer any payment. And again, SVP has guides you can use that I believe they're in the chat as well as short interactive learning modules to kind of guide you through how to avoid contractor fraud. Moving us to tip number 2 is to clear limbs and trees from around your roof and home. Trimming, next slide, trimming or removing trees is something that should also be done regularly, like inspecting your roof. We should be concerned not only about damaged or dead trees that are very obvious to the eye, but really any tree or limb that could possibly cause harm or damage to your property. When taking inventory of the trees on your property, consider, like I said, removing those dead limbs, removing or reducing branches or trees that are larger size. Consider cutting back heavy limbs that are dangling over your property. Consider reducing the weight of trees that maybe look like they're starting to die, as well as adding, bracing or cabling to help support trees. And generally, a good rule of thumb to take here is to trim anything that is within a 40-foot radius of your property, of your home, to ensure you're really having the largest reach possible for securing your home from any sort of tree or limb that could fall on it. Tip number 3 has to do with the effectiveness of your gutters, downspouts, and roof valleys. So our gutters, downspouts, and roof valleys, they can help. The purpose of them is to help direct rainwater away from the roof, which is what we want, and to keep the rainwater from pooling on the surface of our roof. This can help by having these features. This can help reduce the risk of wind damage by keeping water off the roof, keeping water from pooling there and ultimately loosening nails or other roofing components, as well as protecting it in high wind areas where there might be, again, water pooling, compromising nails or other roofing components. If your home currently has any of these three features, here is an opportunity, again, to inspect it, to ensure that they're working properly. Looking around to seeing, are your gutters and downspouts adequately secured? Are they free of debris? Is the downspout diverting water away from your home? Do you see any pooling water in the valleys of your roof as you look across it? And if you don't have any of these features, this is an opportunity to consider, would you want to hire a professional to install them on your property or on your home to increase the roof's protection? I want to point out here that we spoke about in tip number 1, getting your roof inspected. And oftentimes inspecting these three features may be included in that thorough professional roof inspection. So if hiring a professional to do a roof inspection, see if inspecting these particular features are part of it. And if not, ask for them to look at your gutters and downspouts and valleys to see if they are functioning appropriately. The final 2 tips that I would love for everyone to consider have to do with re-roofing your home. So next slide. And I understand that these next two tips may not be actionable for you right now, but when it comes time for you to put on a new roof, this is knowledge that's going to be handy. So tip number 4 is to consider what options you have for roof types. And these, as you can see on the slide here, are a few of the most common roof covering materials, and they each have their own pros and cons, as well as varying levels of resiliency. And so when you're putting on a new roof, consider whether the material selected offers good performance in the extreme weather conditions that are common in your area. So each family, each homeowner is going to have to make the choice that's best for them. I'm going to briefly, over the next couple of slides, review these 4 most common roof coverings and offer you some insight into some of the features, each of them, that you can consider. So next slide. If you look around your neighborhood, I guess that most of us are going to see asphalt shingles. And that's because generally this type of roof covering is the most common around the country. And that's because it's the most affordable, comes in a variety of colors, and it's easy to repair. And while these types of shingles typically do have a shorter lifespan, they come with an option for a high impact resistant rated shingle, which is valuable. That means that the shingles that are rated as such bring in added resiliency in high wind events. The next roof covering type we have is clay and concrete tile roofs. So while this type of roof covering is a bit more costly and isn't possible on all framing structures, it is extremely durable and requires very, very little maintenance. The third roof covering is metal roofs. And metal roofs have been growing in popularity because they are the most resilient of all of the options, and they have a very long lifespan. And so while it is a greater investment, say, than traditional shingles, the investment pays off over time if you consider the longevity of the product and then the minimal upkeep that's needed, as well as just the resiliency, which you sometimes can't put a price tag to. The last roof type I want to call out are slate roofs. And so this is probably the least common that we see around the United States, and that's typically due to installation cost barriers. But overall, it is a fairly durable material. And ultimately, a well-built, well-maintained roof is what's most important. But if added resilience is important to you, considering different options you have for roof covering materials is something to keep in mind when you are taking on a home renovation. The final tip number 5 that I'll leave you with is to consider re-roofing your home to meet the Institute for Business and Home Safety's fortified standards. And so I understand that this tip may not be actionable for like you right now, but handy knowledge to keep in mind down the road if a new roof is something you have to take on. So Fortified is a voluntary construction and re-roofing program. And it is designed to strengthen homes as well as commercial buildings against specific types of weather, severe weather, such as high winds, hail, hurricanes, and even tornadoes. And this method was developed by the Institute for Business and Home Safety, or IBHS, after conducting extensive field research of real homes after real storms. And so what they do is identify common construction weaknesses, and they test solutions in a research center that is capable of subjecting full-scale homes to realistic storm conditions. So that wind-driven rain, hail, and high wind speeds. And so a little bit of a story here. SBP had firsthand experience with the peace of mind that a fortified roof brings. After Hurricane Ida, which made landfall in Louisiana in 2021 as a Category 4 storm, our clients we work with who lived in properties that we have as affordable rental units had minimal damage, maybe a few shingles missing here and there on their homes. And so this meant that these residents, all who identify as low to moderate income families, were not displaced from their homes, while many of their neighbors were. So it's really seeing the true, putting the fortified roof to the test and seeing the benefit that it has on those who live in a home with a fortified roof. Next slide, there are 4 key pieces of what makes a fortified roof different from other roofs typically built to building code. And so as you can see on the slide here, it means there's stronger edges, a sealed roof deck. The roof deck is attached more thoroughly with a very specific type of nailing pattern. And then there's also added installation features for if you live in a hail-prone area to consider. Once you are, next slide here, once you're ready to re-roof your home to a fortified standard, there are like 4 critical steps along the path to get you to a fortified roof. First is building a team, and that really means working with a builder who knows the standard, and that gives you the security that the upgrades are going to be installed correctly and appropriately, as well as selecting a fortified evaluator who has been trained in the program requirements, and they'll work with you and your builder to ensure the process is smooth. Once you have a team in place, you can start construction. And then throughout that process, that construction process, the evaluator will collect some documentation and verify that the standards are met, as well as submit that verification to IBHS so that ultimately a IBHS fortified designation can be offered, and that determines that that standard has been met for your roof. The next slide here, because fortified homes meet a standard that is scientifically proven to be more resilient than homes built to ordinary building codes, there may be financial benefits to homeowners in some states. In some locations, insurers offer specific discounts to homes with a fortified designation. Those discounts can be as high as like 50%. In other states, there are grants or tax credits that are offered to help offset the cost of upgrading to fortified. And as you can see on this map, this is where fortified specific incentives currently exist, but fortified incentives are spreading rapidly. So always talk with your insurance agent directly and ask if there are any offered in your state, or if there are any just general discounts offered for construction upgrades that help protect your home from severe weather. to wrap this up here, your roof provides the first line of defense against the elements. So by taking some or all of these steps to strengthen it, it's going to provide you better protection from severe weather and just provide you better peace of mind in the event of a severe high wind weather event. So let's get to some of your questions if there are any, and don't forget to submit them if you have any.
Thank you so much, Dulcie, for all that wonderful information. Please, folks, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box. And again, our email address is listed here if you want to reach out separately following the webinar today. Dulcie, as a starting question, we just talked a lot about fortified at the end there. Can you share a little bit more about what insurance specifically folks might get discounts for if they have a fortified roof? Is that a homeowner's insurance policy or flood insurance?
Yeah, great question. The kind of mystery of insurance, I'm sure many of us experience, but a fortified protection would be something that your homeowner's insurance would look at offering discounts on potentially. So do you want to go to your homeowner's insurance company, go to that particular agent on your homeowner's insurance as opposed to your flood insurance to see if those discounts are available to you.
Thanks, Dulcie. Now that's a common challenge, I think, is because folks get confused on what different insurance covers what, and any wind damage would be under your homeowner's insurance policy. And so that's where you could see the discount for investing in this mitigation measure. Again, folks, please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. What advice would you give, Dulcie, to a homeowner who has perhaps an older home where they'd like to perhaps put on a more durable roof, whether it's slate or investing in fortified standards, but they have concerns about some of the integrity of the home? Is it possible to consider some of these, maybe longer term solutions, or are there some challenges they need to think about or be asking questions of their contractor on?
Yeah, I think that last point you made there, Helen, is most important here, is always rely on your professionals to do that assessing of what options you may have to make your home more resilient, particularly when we're thinking about your roof. So those professionals are going to be the ones to be able to really assess more thoroughly your particular property and what is or is not possible. So relying on them, but also making sure you're, again, diligent in ensuring that you are hiring or working with a professional who is legit and who is giving you the information that you need, and that you're asking a lot of follow-up questions to ensure you fully understand what it is that they are proposing that you do on your home.
No, that's really good advice. I have a couple more questions, but I want to quickly note to folks that we love getting survey feedback from you all on what information is helpful to you from our trainings. And so please take a quick minute following this presentation to fill out our survey. It takes a minute or less to do so. My colleague will also drop the link in the chat, or you can take the scan code from the screen. I think another question, Dulcie, is, you talked both about high wind events that can occur inland and coastally. So, there's tornado hazards versus there's more hurricane-based winds. Are there any major differences that folks need to understand in what fortification looks like for one event or the other? Or are these standards that IBHS has around fortified really the same across disaster types?
Great question. When we're talking about fortified specifically in that building standards, there are various requirements depending on if you live, like you said, along the coastal region versus more inland. And so I believe in the chat there's the URL to the fortified website. And so in there's resources that have a map that show you, depending on where your home is located, there are specific more detailed requirements for if you live in a hurricane-prone area versus if you just live in an area that's more prone to tornadoes or high wind. So, yes, there can be differences if we're talking fortified specifically, but if we're just, I think we're just talking about just what you can generally do to keep your home or to make your home, your roof specifically, more resilient to high weather events. I don't think I would say that there's much of a difference. I think all of the actions we suggested today are applicable anywhere that you live. And so any step that you can take, big or small, is going to have a positive outcome for your home.
Thanks, Dulcie. Well, with that, again, folks, please feel free to follow up with us if you have any questions or individual challenges that you'd like to get your questions answered on. But I think as Dulcie very well covered, that making your home more resistant to future extreme weather events really starts in many ways with making sure you have adequate roof protection and are maintaining your roof. And so we hope that the tips shared today will help you in making informed decisions about your roofing. And please feel free to reach out to us and access our resources if we can be helpful for you. I want to note that we have actually a webinar coming up next week that is on contractor avoidance contractor fraud avoidance tips. And so in our follow-up note to all attendees with the webinar recording, we will send a link as well to that upcoming webinar. But please keep track of things that we might have coming up. We have a lot of great tools and resources for you all. So thank you so much for joining today.